Hey guys, this is Emily Lopez, and today I am doing a repair on some crumbling concrete steps. Ultimately, there's going to be some sound things I can't control because I am outside, so I apologize if there's cars driving by and a little bit of ambient noise that's out of our control. So I had posted that I had done a couple of these, and a couple of you had messaged me and asked how I did the repair. So I had originally thought, oh, this isn't something that I probably should do a video about, but you guys asked for it, so I'm going to do a video. So real quick guys, first things first, my mom told me that my Aunt Debbie, and I have two Aunt Debbies, watches all of my YouTube videos, so I wanted to say hi Aunt Debbie, thank you for watching. I am going to start by explaining to you what I've done so far. So if you look at these steps, these two I used a mortar mix on, a quick set mortar mix, and then this one I used a concrete mix. And what the difference was is the mortar mix is going to be a lot finer. It's going to be more like sands and smaller particulate, where you have the concrete mix here. This one doesn't look as good. There were bigger chunks and bigger rocks, so it was hard to get a smoother finish on the smaller, thinner sections. This mortar mix, we should be able to go down to 1/2 inch thickness and be able to get a good bond and smooth it out. So that's the difference in those top two looking a little bit better, and that bottom one, or this one, not looking as good. Now I have 2 more steps to go, so I'll show you how I'm going to do those. What was destroying these steps for us is, first of all, they're just old. This is an old, probably an old pour. This is old concrete. And then second of all, Wyoming winters are gnarly, and we a lot of times use salt for safety, especially on steps. If it's a rental or you have a commercial space, you can't have it be hazardous. So as much as I know salt destroys concrete, we also had to use something to keep these steps safe. So when I start repairing concrete steps, the first thing I'm going to take into mind is you don't want anything loose. So anything that is going to break off, concrete is not going to attach to, because it's just going to flick off, right? It's like if you paint over peeling paint, it's just going to come back off. You have to get all the loose stuff. So what I like to do is start with a wire brush and break off everything that's loose. If you kind of have a loose piece that you can't get with the wire brush, if you have to use a little hammer, a little chisel, get off everything that's loose before you get started. Okay, now because I am using a quick set material, I am going to do 1 step at a time. This is going to set up much faster than normal concrete and or mortar or cement mix, and that's the reason we're using this mix, because we need somebody to be able to walk on the step later today. Normal concrete mix, you would set a frame, you would pour your concrete, you would set it all up, you'd follow your process, and then I'd probably come back and pull that frame later. In this case, I'm going to do just a small board as my framing. I'm going to do the top, I'm going to let it set up a little bit, and then I'm going to pull that board away and then smooth the side actually pretty quickly. This step, I left the frame on too long, and when I went to pull it off part of the step with me, and I had to re-pour it and reframe it out. So we're going to work quicker than you normally would with normal concrete. Now I am going to use a couple tools that you'll see in this video, but ultimately you really could do this with very few hand tools if you didn't have these. So let me show you what I'm going to use. Now the first thing I'll tell you guys is there's a lot of things that I'm really proficient in. Concrete, I have no formal training. I'm just a DIYer on concrete, so take this with a grain of salt. This is definitely a DIY. This is not going to be a forever solution, but it should hold up for, I did one of these on a property like 6 years ago, and it's still holding up, so it should hold up a decent amount of time, but this isn't probably your forever solution like doing a re-pour. Now what I'm going to do is, I have a high-speed mixer because I'm actually mixing a relatively small amount of this, so I'm going to mix with that, but really you could just mix it with a trowel. If this is all you had, you could do this whole project with a trowel and a bucket. It would just take you a little bit longer, and you might be a little bit sore from mixing the next day. But I'm going to mix with a high-speed mixer, and then I have a wood float, I have a magnesium float, and then I just have a point trowel, but really it's just that smooth metal finishing edge instead of like a concrete metal finisher. And then I have a edger, but you really could do this by hand by forming that corner over if you had to. So really, this in a bucket in water is all you have to have. So don't feel like you have to go buy all these things if you're just doing a project and you don't think you're going to do this again. I do think a sponge, this is just like a tiling, I use these when I tile. They're probably in your tile section at Home Depot, and I think they have them in the concrete section. This is helpful for smoothing. So the big thing is, you want to make sure that it's clean, that there's no debris, and then there's actually primer, a bonding primer you can put on for your new and old concrete to bond together better. But different products, some go together and some don't, so make sure you read that you're not using 2 conflicting products. The other thing that I see some people do when they do this is they actually take like Tapcon screws that are made for concrete, and they drill them in a couple spots to help join the pieces together. and then it kind of gives you a grab, almost like when you're doing a normal pour and you use rebar. However, I have not done that many times and it's been fine without that, so I am not going to drill screws into it, but I am going to use a bonding primer on here before I start. So I'm going to go get that and put that on here and let that start setting up. So a lot of people paint this on. I was lazy, I just poured it on because I don't have a paintbrush with me. I'm going to let that set up a little bit. Depending on the product you use, it might want it wet, it might want it dry. Just make sure you're following that recommendation. So if you're using that bonding primer. Just gonna put, this is cut to the right size, I'm gonna put this up against my piece. And because I'm doing these one at a time, I'm just working my way down so I don't have to, you know, if I put anything down onto this one, it's not done yet. And then I just have some blocks I'm gonna put up against this to hold it in place while I do the top pour. That's the step we're working on, our board, and then I just have blocks holding it that are easier for me to pull when I'm ready to finish the front side. So that's our setup, that's it. Now before I start mixing, I like to have everything ready because this is not like normal concrete what I'm using. This is a quick set material. Let me show you the product I'm using. This is Rapid Set Mortar Mix from Home Depot. So if you're using a mixing drill, I have my mixing drill plugged in, I have my mix close by, I have a hose with running water so I can get the amount of water in there I want in there. If you are not familiar with mixing like mortar or concrete, I think we all have a consistency we like. So I'm not gonna use measurements, I just kind of have a texture I want it to be. If you're unsure, there's instructions for ratios on the back of the bag. Just follow those if you're not familiar or comfortable kind of guessing the consistency you want. So I like to start by putting some water in the bottom so I don't have like clods of dried material that I'm fighting against. So I start with some water, then I'll put in my mix, and then I'll put more water in if I need to. You really should wear a mask when you're mixing concrete. I don't have one, so I'm not going to, but you should wear one. And again, if you don't have a hand mixer, like a power mixer, you can use a trowel. I would just do smaller batches because it will be easier for you to work through it if you're doing it by hand. I like to make a little bit more than I think I need, and then you just got to dump out what you don't use because it will set up in your bucket fast. But if you're a little bit stressed because you're new to this and you don't have enough and you don't have a helper and you have to mix it real quick, you're gonna start panicking, and then that never makes your project go well. Okay, and just for you guys to see the consistency. I've mixed it too. That's what I'm happy with to work with. It gives me some time, but you might adjust for your preference. Okay, I'm gonna try to give you a side view, so hopefully I'm not blocking too much of what I'm doing. Because I have this flexible bucket, if I mixed it light enough, I can start by pouring it in because I did a small amount. If not, you can just trowel it in depending on what you mixed in. And if it's too thick, it won't pour in anyway. Not too thick, but if you mix thicker than I did. So get it in there, and then I try to really drive it in with my trowel just so it's deep in that edge because you don't want a bunch of air pockets and bubbles. So really trying to drive it into those voids deep so I don't have any hollow spots. So just trying to push it in, push it deep. Push it down into that groove because that's where it's going to be in its thinnest spot. And then I'm just pushing it in. Okay, then what I like to do now, if you're not going to use what's left in your bucket relatively quickly, you need to dump that out or it's going to set in your bucket really fast. So be mindful of that. I like to keep a little bit. So if I need to touch anything up on my front piece, I can. But if you're not going to be quick, just mix more later. Okay, so then I like to take something and hit around my frame to try to work out any air bubbles. If you have something like an orbital sander or something that vibrates or bounces, you could kind of put that on the side of this just to shake it down. That will really help get your bubbles out. I'm just gonna hit it a bunch. I've been doing that and it's been working okay for just a small project like this. All right, that's a little bit better. So I'm gonna actually try to just do all the finishing with my 7-inch point trowel, just to show you that you can do it with one thing. And my sponge, I'm still gonna use my sponge. Concrete and mortar are the perfect balance of treating it right and not touching it too much. So you see me kind of work it down, hit the edges to try to get the bubbles out. And then what I'm gonna do is I just wanna kind of be smoothing the top. And so I'm just gonna push firmly and kind of shift back and forth, shimmy, shimmy. Shimmy, shimmy, y'all, shimmy, yeah, shimmy, yeah. Give me the mic so I can take it away. Shimmy, shimmy across, and just start kind of working that surface. And you know, if you mess it up, anything can be fixed. You can always pour over it, cut a piece out, pour over it. You can fix anything. So don't freak out if you're trying something. If you find a loose spot, just grab some of your extra mortar, like, or some of the stuff that falls down. Just put it in that spot. And just kind of see how you just kind of flatten it out and work it in. So you can always take some out if you have too much. You can always add some in if you need to add a little bit more to a certain spot. Well, to a certain point. Right now we can. Shimmy, shimmy, y'all, shimmy, yeah, shimmy, yeah. Now I'm gonna leave it alone for a minute. I'm gonna rinse off my tools so they don't get dry. I'm gonna throw away what's in my bucket so it doesn't set up, unless you have another place you're going to, and then you can put it on there. But if you don't, it's gonna set up probably faster than you want. So get it out of your bucket or it's gonna set up in there. I might try to patch a little bit of it on here just because I know I'm doing this one next so I don't waste it. But I'm gonna leave that alone and let it set. All right, now I'm just gonna come back to it and I'm just gonna fill it with my trowel and see how I'm feeling about the consistency. So it's getting firmer, but it's still moving quite a bit. Now I have to remind myself, if you're using normal concrete mix or a normal mortar mix, not a quick set, you're probably not gonna wanna pull this yet. But like I said, there was one time that I waited too long, and then when I cut it, I had to like cut in with my trowel to like break it apart and then smooth it out and fix it. So this is meant to be able to be applied like upright and vertical. You should be able to do it overhead if you make it thick enough. Like I smacked this down here like my extra and it's holding on. And so it should have some holding power, but if it's too wet, it will just dump out. So I think I'm getting close to the point where I do want to pull my board away, because you're gonna get some suction between your concrete and your board and you don't want to leave it too long. So I'm actually gonna move my blocks and just kind of do a tender little pull and see if I want to pull it away, or if no, I'm not quite ready. So we're gonna do an investigation. And honestly, if you mess up and you pull it off, you can just start again. Everything is fixable. Hey, my mommy's here. Okay, so I can see, hold on just a sec. So I can see that it's pulling, like when I go to pull, it wants to take that. So I'm gonna take my little trowel and I'm gonna kind of I'm creating some separation here. And I have it smooth up against my wood so I'm not gouging into the back side of the concrete or the mortar. Okay, see, look. Now I can smooth this out and make it prettier. If I would have waited too long, it would have gotten hard to see how I had to create that separation. But I can smooth this, and then I'm gonna leave it again, and then I can do more smoothing once it's a little stronger. You can kind of see your weak spots where it bows, so you don't want to mess with it too much. Let it get strong, come back to it, make it pretty, and make your adjustments. So right now, I kind of have a bow here. I'm going to work my way up a little bit at a time, but only every once in a while because I don't want to mess with it too much. All right, so I've given a little bit of time. Now I'm just coming back to it and just working this up because it's trying to slump forward a little bit. I'm getting a bit of a lip up there, but I'll smooth that out later. So you can kind of see as I'm working this up, I'm getting that divot because of the slump that it's trying to do, which that's okay. And I could have filled that in later, but I have some excess up here. I can work that in. I'm trying to just smooth the top, not push too far down because I'm still working against that gravity a little bit.
5 minutes later.
And I want to make sure you notice that I did this step with just this and this. So if this is all you have, you can make it work. Okay, so there you have our repaired stairs. If this video has been valuable at all to you, I would greatly appreciate if you would hit that subscribe button, like this video, and even leave a comment.